So, new meander on wholeness this time. I like on these meanders to reflect on patterns or questions that consistently come up in power of place or in our work with clients about regenerative work. And one of the more common ones is, what is really regenerative? And that's been our constant question and quest as we've been developing ourselves. It's why we called our organisation Really Regenerative, because we are still asking, is this way of working really regenerative? What does it mean to be really regenerative? How do we know when something is really regenerative and when it isn't? And because of the wave of interest in regeneration is growing exponentially all the time, and there are constantly new people coming into the field, and generally I don't think anyone has really sought to say this is the definitive version of what it is to be regenerative, because we're all evolving towards it and all simultaneously remembering our innate heritage as living beings to be regenerative. It's a big question to think about. And in a way, finding that answer is our life's work. What does it take to realign ourselves to the impulses that have created the conditions conducive to life for 3.8 billion years? It's among the questions we're all living. And I'm certainly, I've just sunk in a bog, still finding my way into the answers. It took a lot of exploration until I felt remotely close to being able to say this is at the heart of what is regenerative for me. I had to test things out, experiment with them, develop cognitive understanding, but also learn how to really feel into more embodied sensory way. And that continues to be very hard for me, and I think for many of us, especially those of us deeply raised in the culture that prizes knowledge and cognitive intellect. But over time I found some premises and frameworks that I think are pretty strong contenders to say, yes, this is really regenerative, this is how life works. And largely those things have come out of four interrelated fields. In the first is biology. Biologists study life and how it works. Closely related are ecologists, maybe even zoologists. And Janine Benyus and the Biomimicry Institute's codification of life's principles was probably the first thing that lifted my eyebrows in a not aha moment. That's how we would design good chemistry in the built environment. Aha! That's how we would design trains or swimsuits or the surface of hospital equipment so it didn't attract bacteria. And when the Institute first stepped towards biomimicry for social innovation, looking at how those principles in the context of human culture, that felt really interesting, as did developmental biology, psychology fields, and even the field of quantum physics. I was married to a quantum physicist once, started to kind of fuse it together for me, with more than a dash of indigenous wisdom and practice that seemed to understand the whole thing without any ology-sourced angst at all. But in terms of looking at those principles and interpreting and applying them to human economy and human culture to realign to those living systems whilst also restoring the living systems we've impacted to a regenerative state, I think Carol Sanford's expression of 7 core principles are the ones which landed most strongly for me. So perhaps my understanding and approach is a fusion of all those things. But some of these things are really slippery when you try to work with them in the world that is, while trying to birth something new, effectively what we're all really engaging in. And one of the most slippery you might have encountered is wholeness. Living systems are whole, not fragmented, comparmentalised, not reduced, not parts but wholes. So what does it mean to be whole? I'm a whole living being, but am I really whole? My cells regenerate. So my cells are regenerating all the time, but as I age, less effectively. But am I less whole if my respiratory system isn't working well? Well, yes. A part of me might not be working so well, but I'm still whole, I'm still me. So wholeness then is maybe something beyond mere functionality. If my heart stops, am I still whole? Well, possibly, but technically I'm dead. So, although as a whole living dead system, I'm still of interest for many living systems of bacteria. So there is something about wholeness in which parts of the whole, some parts are more nodal than others, but they're never entirely standalone. And then there's something about wholeness that keeps you alive. There's some quality that is about aliveness, vitality, viability. So what is it then if we think about other places, other living systems? Is one forest whole and another not? Like the one I'm walking through right now. Is a forest the right scale of entity to look at as a living system, given we've replanted most of them and shrunk the rest to make way for agriculture? How do you think about that at the scale of a city or even a small village? Why does it add value to even think about wholeness in the context of an economy or culture? So there's also something about the aliveness of wholeness that simply just is. There's something about encountering that sense of aliveness that commands respect and recognition for the unique being that is wrapped up in it. It's easier to see in the context maybe of a single human than it is in the landscapes we've manufactured. And in some ways it's also a simple note to self, to always be mindful of not falling into reductionism. Even if we just ask ourselves the question, if I consider what kind of whole is this? What whole system is contained in front of me is with a sense of vibrant aliveness? Might be a neighbourhood, cluster of neighbourhoods, district in a city. And there's also something I think about wholeness that has some kind of forward evolutionary momentum. So wholeness in the context of a living system thing, it's not static, it has vitality, it has aliveness. If you look at a ploughed field of brown clumps, of soil, you know you're not looking at wholeness, but depletedness. Sometimes it's very sensory, it's kind of on the wind. It's the hardest of living systems principles, I think, to grasp, particularly in the context of cultural and economic systems today that aren't whole, so we struggle to experience it. And I think that's why the cacophony of a biodiversity hotspot like a rainforest moves us so much, because it's a genuine experience of wholeness. I remember in the 70s when I first visited Nueva and Sharm el-Sheikh and first put my head in the sea and saw the myriad of species living on a live living coral reef, and gasped with wonder and nearly choked myself on seawater because I forgot to grip my mask with my teeth. But there are places that are full of life out there. We know when we've stepped into a neighbourhood with that kind of vitality. It has connection between its people, it looks cared for, it's providing for its whole community, human and non-human. It has space and comfortability with diversity within it. There's a sense of possibility to fulfill individual potential within the forward momentum of the whole. We also thought a lot about wholeness when we developed Power of Place over the last 4 years. At first, we sort of just looked at understanding place and right relationship. How could we inhabit places differently? What would be the core knowledge we would need to prepare us for a regenerative journey into place? Living systems principles, pattern literacy, the capacity to deveil unrecognized patterns and beliefs that were holding a dying system in place, a framework at looking at that journey from one paradigm to another, and how could we be in right relationship with ourselves, with each other. Gonna have to turn around, I'm hitting a bog. What would be the qualities and capabilities? What would it be like to convene multi-stakeholders behind a new evolutionary purpose and shape the social infrastructure? So stabilising nets, rituals, habits, customs, practice that would sustain a community through the turbulence of transformative change. What would be the role of things like energy centres? And that was okay for the first 2 years, but it just didn't feel whole. It always felt something was missing. So in the last 2 years, we added systems evolution. So if we can understand a place through a living systems lens, if we can convene fields of energy to pursue evolutionary purpose over time, then we felt we needed to have a process for transformative change, a way of those groups evolving the systems of place through the projects they designed and what that might look like and ask of us over time. How to find the critical nodes in systems and how to sense into which ones to work on and how to design interventions that would be the difference that makes the difference. It didn't feel complete. It evolves every year and it could easily be 3 years, but that felt whole. Another aspect of wholeness we always thought about was the open nature of the invitation. So we have architects, from people from the built environment, we have tourism professionals, city authorities, urban planners, guardians of national parks and other natural systems, waterways, coastal ecosystems, private estates, place-based businesses and brands. What they share is an interest in creating aliveness in place. And what they represent is the wholeness of place when they come together. And of course, we've got versions of power of place for specific places when stakeholders come together, a bioregion, for example, where we convene the whole into a bespoke course. But what we thought about for a while and then discarded was power of place for tourism, POP for the built environment, or POP for private estates. Because although it might feel more recognizable and overcome the "but is this relevant to me" sort of question, it would detract from the whole, where a farmer can learn from an urban planner and a private estate can learn from an NGO. And I also remember once seeing a great talk, or it might have been a presentation from Michelle Holiday on aliveness and wholeness. Might see if I can find it and share that link in the notes. So that's a little reflection on wholeness in the context of how we experience it as one of the core living systems principles, akin to aliveness, something that you might be able to cognitively learn about, but that you really have to learn and lean into and sense into and embody, I think, to really grasp.